That's not related to this, though, right?
What? No, those are separate now. Awesome. All right, well, Russ, did you have any particular questions, particular sentences you want to look over from the homework? Or that with the guide, with the answer key didn't make sense?
Nothing that I needed to go over.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, I want to look at just one sentence, from Cicero's De Amicitia, actually. Where he says, right, I can compare nothing with friendship. The gods gave man nothing better. De hominibus nihil melius sunt. Some prefer wealth, others a sound body, others fame and glory, others fleshly pleasures. But these men err greatly, because those things are uncertain and come from fortune. So as I was translating, I thought that line was really interesting, especially in Cicero's context. So Cicero, one of the things that he was looked down on for was that he was what was called a new man, a novus homo. And the idea almost is, it's like if you've seen the movie Titanic, you know, there's that woman, I can't remember who it is, but they're all like, oh, she's new money. She's not kind of from the old crowd, you know. And that was the same thing with Cicero. The Romans, I can't remember who it was, I think maybe it was Seneca, but one of the things that you almost had to prove was that you didn't really need to work, like to be hip, so to speak, whatever, to be in with the patricians. It was almost bad, bad policy to work too hard. Like one guy's like, look, I don't even cultivate half my fields, okay, so back off. And it's just, anyway, so Rome's a little different. So I wanted to look at where Cicero says, but these men err in preferring all these other things, because, he says, illa sunt incerta et ex fortuna venient non ex sapientia. Okay. So Cicero here is drawing a pretty strong contrast between, he's going to go on and develop it, what friendship is based on versus what, wealth and fleshly pleasures and what were some of the other things? Sorry, he listed there. A sound body, fame, glory, all these things, he says, he summarizes that they are incerta et ex fortuna, uncertain and come by fortuna. What does he mean by fortuna?
Come by luck?
Yeah, basically what we would mean by luck. That it was not, so to speak, based on your doing, right? Not really based on anything that you did, but it was kind of luck of the draw, right? So I don't know, when I was reading De Amicitia, I struggle with this contrast. Like, is friendship really not ex fortuna? Like the people that are brought into your life, I mean, just as much as fame or glory or wealth or whatever, because, and especially since Cicero says this, it kind of gives me extra pause. Well, Cicero, you attained wealth, you attained power, you attained fame and glory. Did it really just come, ex fortuna? Did it not come from sapientia, from wisdom? So he goes on and he says about friendship, to put it in its following context, for friendship comes from wisdom and love and custom, good habits and virtue. For without virtue, friendship cannot be. So I just kind of wondered what does Cicero mean by that, or what is he? I don't know. Kind of what is he getting at, hinting at when he says that friendship comes from wisdom, and these other things don't come from wisdom. I don't know. Just kind of made me think. Is he? Yeah. What did you think about it? Okay.
Like Cicero probably favors a meritocracy view of the world.
I would think so, but then he says that all the things that you would merit come by fortune.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was shocking to me, is because I would think he would say, look, and I mean, I feel like this is true in my life. Like, you think of the people that God brings into your life, and you go, man,
That's not
right?
my doing.
That's more of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
man, thanks be to God who brought these people into my life. And instead, he kind of flips it on its head, that friendship comes because of your wisdom. And so, one of the things I love to do when I read an author who's a lawyer, and Cicero is a lawyer deep, deep down in his heart, same thing you can do with Paul, is you can say, how is he going to build his argument? Like, what, if he thinks that friendship is based on sapientia, on wisdom and wise conduct, how would he argue that? Why isn't friendship based on fortune, the people that God, or the gods, right, bring into your life?
Probably because you have to cultivate deep friendships, and in order to do that, you need to have wisdom and how to treat people and how to love them, and you have to have good virtue, and they will flee.
Yeah.
So I'm sure when he uses friendship, he's probably referring to something deeper than just
The people you know.
acquaintances.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you read on, that's exactly how he kind of structures his argument, is to make it way too trite, but if you want to be a friend, you've got to be a friend. Or right, to have a friend, you've got to be a friend. And being a friend means conducting yourself in the ways that you should. I still kind of question the first part, the fame and glory, but that's actually a pretty normal way to argue. It's arguing to an extreme. It's hyperbole, basically, we could say. So it's the same thing, I think, or a similar thing that happens in the Bible when it says, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. I think a similar kind of thing is being done where you're kind of setting two things at contrast, whereas friendship comes from all these great habits. Yeah, we know jerks who are rich. Just be honest, right? We know jerks and dummies who are famous. No comments about who those people might be, or what branches of local and federal and state government they might serve. But anyway, especially in Illinois, right? So there you go. Anyway, it's interesting to kind of think about that contrast. That you might get a lot of those things, but they're ultimately unsure, right? And if you are conducting business and you've gotten your fame and your sexual pleasures and all these things in bad ways, right? Then just wait, right? Wait, because the flip side's coming. So anyway, I think it's an interesting observation from Cicero. So
also, it seems like fame is a shade of reputation, and reputation is kind of linked to what your friends think about you.
Yeah. Fame. There are two very common Latin words for fame. Actually, both of them come basically right into English: fama and rumor. And Virgil, in his Aeneid, I can't remember what book it is. Oh, I'm sorry. But if you ever want to look it up, you could look up Virgil's metaphor on rumor. And it's awesome. Basically, he just says, in a nutshell, he says, rumor creeps on the housetops and listens to the city and flies quicker than the clouds at night. And it never rests. And the darker the landscape gets, the more present rumor is. And she's always listening. It's kind of this winged monster with ears all over her body. And anyway, it's just kind of this crazy, creepy, awesome metaphor about how this destroys people and destroys cities and ultimately destroys Dido, and she ends up taking her life in the Aeneid at the end of that book. I can't remember what book it is, so I apologize for that. But anyway, his metaphor on rumor is awesome. Extended metaphor. All right, so we're going to do 2 chapters again this week, or this month, and I hope that's not super scary. It's actually really similar to last time, which maybe is a good thing or maybe is a bad thing. The first chapter, chapter 11, is more pronouns, personal pronouns and demonstratives. So we have one more demonstrative, basically, and the personal pronouns. Okay? All right. So we're going to hit the personal pronouns, and those are the ones that students basically want, especially English speakers. We basically want the personal pronouns in week 1, which is why they don't give them to you until this far in, because we just don't need them. And that's a great thing to know going in is, Okay, if you don't need a personal pronoun, why would the author insert a personal pronoun? So for example, up to this point, really what we'd see is a verb like demonstravo. I will demonstrate. Bo bis bit. I will demonstrate such and such. This is a good Cicero verb. But now what we'll see is, or what we might see is, ega demonstravo. So why has our author made the decision? Because it's all about an author's choice. So now why might the author choose to include ega in this version of the sentence?
To draw attention to the quality of the person.
Good. Now, couldn't we figure out the subject from Bo?
Yes.
Yeah, we sure can, right? We know it's I will demonstrate, I will show. So this ega, think of it, and especially a lawyer context is really helpful, because think of that lawyer going, I will now show such and such, and the emphasis comes on now the pronoun. And that's really how Latin uses pronouns. Ega, such and such. You are guilty, you. Tu poinas. You will pay the penalty. You don't need it. So when we see it, we almost need to in English, we have to italicize it basically. You will pay the penalty. And so the reason why they delay it is because it's more of a stylistic tool than it is a grammatically necessary tool. Okay. So with ega, tu, and nos, and vos, especially, we can see that element. But since our goal is to read authors and commune with the dead, right? Talk to dead people, let's look at another example. Now, first sentence, demonstravit. Second sentence, ea demonstravit.
They.
No, but look at my subject. Or look at my verb.
She.
He, she.
Okay, so now what's the difference? If I just saw demonstravit, what would I probably supply as a pronoun?
He.
I would probably supply a he. So now we can say, oh, wait a second. Sometimes, though, with a third person pronoun, they might actually introduce a feminine pronoun because, we might default to a masculine, but now we actually could see, it's supposed to be a feminine subject.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, again, it could still be, for example, if it was is demonstravit, that is, it would probably be an emphatic use of the pronoun. But with the feminine, maybe not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So it could just be showing the subject's gender. Okay? And so that, again, it's not something that is going to destroy a sentence or butcher a sentence or anything, but it's just starting to grow in our sensitivity to how an author would use a pronoun or not use a pronoun. Okay? So those are going to show up. The declensions go all the way through. They're pretty easy. One thing, as far as there's nothing new grammatically really going on, but the one thing, especially to keep your eyes on, is notice that for I and you, the ablative and accusative forms are the same. So for the first person singular, the accusative is may and the ablative, is may. For the second person singular, the ablative is te, the accusative is te, and the ablative is te. So just be aware that they'll use both of those forms, and they're not going to look different. Okay? And you'll just kind of have to go, do I think that's an ablative, like an object of a preposition, or do I think it's an accusative, a direct object, or an object of another preposition? Okay? All right. Let's see. Okay, so those are personal pronouns. Personal pronouns. And they follow the same rules that we've learned for nouns. right? So for example, spectas me. Spectas me. You look at me, or you see me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So here we see may, that's a pronoun in the accusative, singular, right? Because it's a first person singular pronoun. But the other thing that they introduced in chapter 11 are personal pronoun adjectives. Is that what they call them? I just want to make sure.
No.
Possessive pronominal adjectives.
Possessive or demonstrative?
Possessives. So we're going to get to the last demonstrative in a second. So the difference here is with a possessive pronominal adjective, a PPA, the difference is that this is an adjective. So I'm like triple underline the A. And as an adjective, it doesn't follow the pronoun rules, which are basically noun rules, nominative, subject, accusative, direct object, and so on. As an adjective, it follows the adjective rule, which is
We conjugated according to the endings for the
good, and adjectives always do what?
follow the noun in genitive.
Good. So as a personal possessive pronominal adjective, what it's going to do is it's going to match the noun it modifies. So for example, specto casum tuum.
I see your house.
I see your house. Versus, or contrasted with, the true pronoun form in the genitive. So grab the form of you in the genitive that we could also use to say, I see your house. I see the house
Of you.
of you. So what would that pronoun be?
May.
Of your house.
You.
To.
Good. Specto casum tui. And notice we're communicating the same thing, right? The house of you, your house. Same idea is being communicated, but we have two options. We can use a pronoun in the genitive, your house, or we can use a possessive pronominal adjective. I feel like I dropped a syllable. Pronominal, that's right. Okay. Possessive pronominal adjective. Okay? Tuum casum. And the nice thing about the possessive pronoun adjectives, which I feel like almost all students end up using those instead, is that you just take meus, tuus, wester,
What's
I
that
speak
one?
noster.
Our.
Yeah, noster, sorry. Noster, nostra, and wester, westra. So, generally speaking, I think as students we almost prefer those. Like, oh, it's just an adjective, it matches the noun it modifies. But in Latin we have both options. Just like in English. It's the house of me. That's awkward, but that's an option. It's an option of how to use it. Okay? Or my house. Mine house would be the adjective.
Mine house?
Yeah, mine house. The house is mine.
You would never say mine house though.
I know, but do we ever use that adjective right before the noun?
You would say my.
My house. But that's the genitive, right? Because it's I, my, me.
The house of me would be the genitive.
I know, but that would just be with of, but take of out. My. Right?
It's mine, not mine, right?
Look, we gotta go to the dictionary.
Mine house.
Mine house, that sounds German. Mine Haus. Mein Hofbrauhaus. Sorry, I'm gonna offend a lot of people from Germany. Okay. Great. It's alright, they're a case language. They're sympathetic to our plight. I need somebody to look up mine. That's what we need. M-I-N-E. I feel like that's the adjective. The dog is mine. That's a predicate adjective.
But you would never, that's not possessive. My house is the possessive adjective.
No, my is it's the genitive pronoun. It's the possessive pronoun.
Mine versus my.
Come on. I'm telling you. I'm right.
Oh, I've never heard that. Okay. Ooh.
What is it?
well, you can't trust the internet always, but is correct to say my question is or mine question is?
Either is correct, it says. I'm going to the Oxford English.
Mine is a possessive pronoun and somehow. Okay, hang on. This is just somebody's stupid ramblings.
Which is the internet, right?
Go to Wikipedia to settle.
Oh, no, you're right. Mine is the possessive pronoun.
My.
Mine is the possessive pronoun.
You're
Some
right.
friends of mine.
Yeah, but
No,
you never
you're
say
right.
mine friends.
Some friends of mine.
Right.
That's what it said. So what is mine?
My is.
My is the possessive pronoun adjective then.
Right. But you would never use mine before a noun, ever.
Mine eyes.
Mine eyes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mine eyes have seen. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of.
That's it.
Yes.
Possessive pronoun is mine.
Is mine
Here, look at the
possessive pronoun or possessive pronoun adjective? Possessive determiner. Possessive pronoun. Oh man, I've got to learn more about English. So anyway, that's how Latin brings us back to we don't understand our own language. It's amazing. Okay. Thank you, Kate. All right, so the last demonstrative that we have is the demonstrative the same as. So actually, it's not the same. The last one. There is one more, but we don't have to worry about it tonight. Okay. So it's just idem, eadem, idem. Sorry, idem. That's a very common legal term, idem. I feel like I've seen that in several legal documents. Not that I'm doing a whole lot of law in my spare time. Okay, so the main thing that actually we can know and should know is that basically these forms conjugate, decline just like those third person pronouns. Is, ea, id. And you can kind of see it. Not there, but you can see ea and id. So they're across the board, they are the same as the third person singular pronouns and plural pronouns with just a couple of changes. But first, let me make this comment. We're going to meet down the line this we call the identical pronouns or identical demonstratives anti-hero, and it's dumb, idum. And you can, idum means, I don't know, somebody. This one means that very person, the same man. Idem wir, the same man. Dumb means, I don't know, some guy. Idem wir, some guy. And so you can think you're dumb if you don't know which one it is, and dem, it's the dem ones right there. So, precise English grammar all the time. Okay, so anyway, they're always the same, and if you look at the declensions, they give you the two examples that aren't the same. Okay, and the two examples are the accusative, where we get eundem, instead of eundem. So eundem, eundem, and idem again. Because neuters are always the same in the nominative and accusative. And then we get in the plurals, eorendem, the genitive plurals, eorendem, earumdem, dem, and eorumdem. So the kind of the easy way to notice it is if you notice any form of the pronoun that ends in an M is going to be switched to an N, is basically what's happening there. So again, it would be eorum, and it becomes eorum. Eum becomes eum. So that's that change. Otherwise, it's the same. And again, it'll just be like those other demonstratives where sometimes it's used with a noun, the same woman, the same child. And sometimes it's used by itself. And so we can just substitute that man, or that very man, that same woman, that same thing. Okay? Idem. And that's how it shows up in legal context, I believe. They'll just put idem for the same.
The same.
Yeah, basically, it's the...
Is that the same thing? Ibid? What's ibid?
Ibid. Ooh, ibid. Oh, dadgummit. I was thinking of ibid in my head. It's a different... I think it's ibi, which is there, but it's like in that same place. That's embarrassing.
I think ibid is different.
Ibid is different, I believe. I'm fairly sure. Okay, so that's chapter 11. Really, is just those personal pronouns. Okay. All right. Chapter 12 is a fun chapter, and I'm glad we've got 30 minutes for it. Okay. This is one of the most like
Terrifying.
it's terrifying. Good. That's good. That's what I want. Okay. Now, just so you know, I don't know. I might say the same things as I say on my Latin channel, but I have a whole nother video that unpacks this in pretty significant detail also. So I'm going to try to teach it well, but maybe even teach it slightly differently than it's up there on that other video, so that if you want to, you can see me teaching it years ago and see if I taught it worse or better or whatever. Okay. So what we're going to talk about is the perfect active system. I'm already overwhelmed and scary. I'm very sweaty already. Okay, so here we go. The perfect active
Don't we already
system.
know? What do we know already?
Okay, great. Always build on what we know. So what is the active system we've already learned?
Present, active, indicative.
Okay, good. So we've learned the whole present active system.
So what's that?
Okay. So here's what we've got to kind of take a step back to, and we've got to go, okay, we're adding a whole new system. Not just a tense this lesson, but a whole system of verbs. And the reason why we can do that is because it's actually pretty easy. And that's the worst thing to ever tell your students, by the way, is that it's easy. Because then if you don't get it, you're like, I'm dumb, I can't do an easy thing. So strike that I ever said that from your minds. Here we go. The present active system, all system means is you build on the blank stem. That's all that means. So the present system built on the present stem. Okay? So I'm just going to grab our verb, moneo, I warn. Moneo, monera. And even though in Wheelock's he gives you 4 forms, you notice we haven't used form 3 or form 4 yet. Not at all, not once. Okay? Because if I were to build the present active of moneo, I would just grab my infinitive stem, mone, and I would add my endings, ost, mostis, nt. So moneo, mones, monet, monemos, monetis, monet, right? Okay, so that would be my present active. Oops. Present active. Could do the same thing for the future. For my future active, for a second conjugation verb, I would grab that same stem, mone, plus my be forms, right? Bo, bis, bit, bimbis, bitis, bunt. So monebo, monebis, monebit, monebimus, monebitis, monebunt. The last tense that we've learned that's from the present system, and there are only 3, the present, the future, and?
Imperfect.
Imperfect, good.
Can I
Bob.
ask you a question though?
Yes.
Because it just occurred to me, we've learned the present active system, but we've learned the perfect and the imperfect in the present system.
Okay, we've only learned the imperfect so far, right?
Well, the future and the imperfect in the present
That's
system.
right, okay.
But you see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes,
Is
yes.
that a misnomer?
Okay, it's not a misnomer, so I'm going to come back to this. Look, this is what I already wrote.
Okay, all right.
I already wrote it. So the imperfect, we did the same thing. We went to the infinitive. We grabbed our stem, mone, plus ba ba black sheep. Have you any wool? Imperfect, imperfect, 3 bags full. Okay, and we added those endings. Mst, mostis, nt. Monebum, monebas, monebat. Monebamos, monebatis, monebunt. Right? So when we say system, all we mean is it builds off of the present stem.
Oh.
It builds on the present stem.
It has nothing to do with the present.
It has nothing to do with the tense itself. Okay?
But the present
So the
stem
present
is the
tense, right, so the present tense builds off the present stem. But the future tense also builds off the present stem. And the imperfect tense also builds off the present stem.
Right, that makes sense.
So all that we mean when we say that these verbs are in the present system is that they build on the present tense. On the present stem.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So now when we go to the perfect system, we're going to go, oh, wait a second. all of these verbs must build off of something else.
Yeah.
Okay? And they do. And I can guarantee you that this is much easier than the present system. Okay? Because they all, just like the present system, they build on the same thing. We just have to learn some endings. Okay? So, before we talk about how to build them, I want to just talk about what is going to happen. And so we have to talk about time. We've kind of already talked about this a little bit. This is the past, this is the present, this is the future. Okay. What verb tense do we use if we want to talk about things happening now? Present. I'm going to use the verb run. So in the present, we have two ways in English, but really only one way in Latin of talking about something happening now. We can say in English, I run, or I
am running.
Good. I run, I am running. We call those a simple present, the simple present, and the present progressive. In Latin, that would just be one form. Corro. Corro. I run. Or I am running. Either way. In Latin, how would we talk about an action that's ongoing in the past? The imperfect. That's what that means. Imperfect means not completed, not done, repeating or ongoing. So I'm going to do the same thing. We have an ongoing past action or a repeated past action. So that could be two things. I was running. That's that ongoing past action. Or we could even say it this way. Every Friday morning, I used to run. That's that habitual, repeated, we call it an iterative action. Iterative just means again and again and again. In Latin, correbo. I was running or I used to run. Notice I'm using the same color blue for all of these tenses. You'll see why in a second. Okay. What tense do we use to talk about a future action?
Future.
The future, right? And the future has these same two, we call them aspects as the present. Either a simple future or a future progressive. Okay? So, simple future, I will run. Future progressive,
I will be running.
I will be running. And you see that, it almost makes you uncomfortable to say, like, I will be running? Ugh. And it's because it's clunky. We don't usually like to say it, although sometimes we do, right? I will be heading your way at such and such a time. Leave it out for me. Okay? And in Latin, this is a third conjugation verb. Curro, currere. Is that a third conjugation I stem or a third conjugation consonant stem?
Consonant stem.
Good. So when we make our future, we just take our consonant stem and add ace, et, amos, atis, end. So it would just be currum. I will run or I will be running. Okay. Those are the tenses we've done so far. Everything in blue is in the present system. Okay? All right. Now, I know this doesn't always come through super clearly on video. Let me know if you can see this red or if I should switch to green. I'm worried that the green won't be distinguished enough from the blue. So I'm going to use red. Okay. So now we're going to learn 3 new tenses. Here we go. I'm going to start with the one that is going to set us up, I hope, for the most success. So if something happens way, way, way in the past, if it literally happens before the past, or before other completed actions, we call it the pluperfect. So I'm going to draw a line here in the past. Because when we're talking, when we put the thing that we put the furthest back in the past, we put it in English into the pluperfect, and that's what we call it in Latin and in Spanish also. The pluperfect. Literally it means more than done. Plus quam perfectum. More than done. it's well done. If it's a steak, it's well done. Okay. So the pluperfect in English, think about it if you were telling a story. Think about how you would tell the first action of something that happened to you.
I ran.
Okay. How about way back? That would just be here. I ran. We need to go way back.
I did run.
Okay, that's getting closer. Even before that.
I used to run.
Okay, now, but even before that. What? I had run. That's exactly right. So I had run to the store when, a car drove up on me or something like this. I don't know what's happening in this story. That's a great start to a story that no one ever believed. Okay, so in the pluperfect, sometimes in English they'll call it the perfect plus had, because we don't know what to call it sometimes in English. So I had run. I had run. And I'm going to put the forms up here later, okay? But in English, the way that we set things the furthest back in the past is to say, I had been traveling overseas regularly, but then such and such happened, okay? Which leads us to the next tense that's also in the past. So we notice that the imperfect is an ongoing past action, a repeated or ongoing past action. So we have another tense that we can use for a completed action. And we call it the perfect, which just means completed. Okay? That's all that word means. Perfect just means completed. So that would be our simple past. I ran. Flock of seagulls. Come on!
I got it.
I saw them in a concert in Chicago. They were playing, a Nike sponsored a road race called the Run Hit Wonder. And so it was all one-hit wonder bands all along the racetrack. So they were there. But people would then stop and listen to the one song that they were playing on repeat. Anyway, so they were there. Kurawi, ibitum. Something like that is what it would be like. Okay, it's never going to sell a million. Okay, it did for them though. Okay, so that's just a simple past action. It's done. I ran. Not I was running when a car hit me, but I ran. Last, the next tense and the last tense that we'll talk about today is, what about something that's completed in the future?
Will have run.
Good. By the time I cross the finish line, I will have run, 5K or whatever, 10K. A marathon. Right?
That's right.
Okay? And we call this, and this is the weirdest one for high school students and just for us on our minds. We call it a future perfect. We're thinking about a future action and we're saying something that will be done before that. So for example, by the time I reach Athens, I will have traveled, 2,000 miles. So we're thinking about this action, and we're going, okay, what will have been complete before that action? So I will have run. By the time I get there, I will have packed my bags. I will have driven to the airport. I will have, hopped on the plane. I will have used the air sickness bag. I will have disembarked, whatever it is. And all those things would be future perfect actions. Because we're talking about a future action, and we're talking about the things that will have come before that. Okay? So in English, usually, one of these two will basically look like a present. Right? When we arrive, we will have, gotten off the plane. Gotten on the plane, whatever it is. Okay? So that sounds like a present, but it's not because it's talking about a future action. And that's really tricky in English. Okay? All right. So that's the verb timeline. That's really how all the verbs work except for participles. But for participles, we have to talk about Einstein, and that's going to happen another time. Okay?
It's kind of funny that it's I had run with I had, but it's I will have. It's funny that it switches.
It switches instead of...
Because I guess you conjugate the will with the I, and then the have becomes like an infinitive.
It becomes a helper verb.
Okay.
Will have. So will's a helper, and then have's a helper, working with run. It's a double helper
Have
verb,
run.
I believe. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Report,
Yes, ma'am.
before you erase, in our 3-day seminar that you did,
Yes.
you gave the example of brushing your teeth.
Yes.
And you had, I have brushed my teeth.
Yes.
And I wrote, that means true perfect.
Okay, so that's the last one. I wasn't going to talk about it because they don't technically talk about it, but since you asked, I will include that. Okay. So don't let this stress you out, because it can stress you out, but it shouldn't stress you out. So sometimes in Latin, an author will use a perfect verb in a present context. Okay, so and here's what I mean. It is now. Have I tied my shoes? Yes, I have tied my shoes. Did I tie them now? Am I tying them now? No, when did I tie them?
Sometime in the past.
Okay, so that is what Kate is talking about. We call that a true perfect. Okay, a true perfect. Now, it's not a different tense, so I'm going to put it in black. It's just a perfect that's used in a present context. So my example about brushing my teeth is, my dad, this is a true story. He used to always check, he would make me like literally breathe into his face on our way to school. And he would say, John, have you brushed your teeth? And here's the thing. He obviously, we're in the car, so he's obviously not asking me if I am currently brushing my teeth. And he's not asking me in the future, will you brush your teeth at some point in the future? And he's not asking me, way in the past, had you brushed your teeth, 3 days ago? Okay. What he's saying is, are your teeth currently fresh, right? Is your mouth fresh, and are your teeth not poisoned with sugar or whatever it is that we put into your mouth this morning at breakfast? Okay. And we call that a true perfect because it's a past action that has a present effect. A past action with a present effect. Again, are your shoes tied? You're not asking, yesterday did you tie your shoes? You're not asking right now, are you tying your shoes? You're saying, have you done this, and does that currently have bearing on the tiedness of your shoes, or the brushedness of your teeth? And this is a big, the example that I use that's big in the Bible is Paul uses this tense a lot when he talks about our status in Christ. I have been baptized. Not I am being baptized. Not I was baptized, but right now I know I stand in grace because I have been baptized. Right. And when we are baptized, he says we are laid into the death and brought into his life. And we have been raised up. There's that verb again. We have been raised. And so that true perfect is actually a really important verb tense for Christians, for sure. Okay? But in the Latin, it'll look the same as the perfect. It'll just be set in a present context. Okay? And that's how Paul structures his argument there. How do I know? Well, I have, all you who have been baptized know this is true. That's how I know. Okay? Or Luther. Luther quotes Paul, and he changes him a little bit, but Luther, somebody asked him, well, how do you know if you're saved, Luther? And for a long time he kept struggling with this, and he answered, baptizomai. There's the Greek form. Baptizomai, I have been baptized. That's my answer. How do I know? So anyway, that's a whole other question about baptism, which we don't have to get into today. But it is interesting, right? If you look at the New Testament, there's always the pattern, as far as I can tell, there's always the pattern of believe and be baptized, he and his whole household. So, anyways, that's another point to get me in trouble for some other time. Okay? All right. So, the last thing then is, how do we build these perfect verbs? So I'm going to grab, it doesn't matter what verb I grab, because they're all going to work so nicely. So in the present system, we have to always ask, well, what conjugation is the verb? And is it a first conjugation? It's going to do long A's. And if it's second, not so in the perfect system. You're going to love it. It doesn't matter what conjugation pattern the verb goes to. So I'm going to use two examples just to illustrate the point. Laudo.
Curare.
Yep. Laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. And I'll use curo as well. So we have a first conjugation verb, and now a third I stem, just to illustrate my point. Kurure, it has an irregular third principal part called kukure. I gotta look that up. Kuratum. Dadgummit, look what you've done. You've made me check my principal parts. No, I'm just kidding. All right, let me check it.
I've eaten that before.
Even I have to do it, right? Okay. This is where I say to my students, you see, even Mr. McCord has to look up words once in a while. And they go, all right, I rock. Okay, cursum. Woohoo! Okay. Oh, cursive. It's flowing. It's running script. Oh, look at that. What a blessing. Okay. So what we can see here is we can see our first principal parts look pretty similar. Laudo, kuro. And that's what we saw already, right? Is that they're all going to have that O in that present active indicative first person singular. We see the same thing with the infinitives. Generally speaking, those infinitives are going to end in RE, but then it gets tricky because is it a long A or a long E or a short E or a long I? Okay? But look at their third, we call them principal parts, which just means building block parts. These are our foundation parts. Notice they both end, right, in a long I. Laudawi and kukuri. And no matter what verb you look at, this is exactly what they look like. Moneo, monere, monui. Umbalo, umbalare, umbalawi. Fugio, fugere, fugi. Anyway, on and on and on. But they're all audiwi. Okay? Audio, audire, audiwi. So they all look like this with the long I. And the reason is they're all going to build off of this third principal part. The third principal part. First principal part, second principal part, third principal part. Okay? And so all we actually have to learn are what are our endings that we're going to put onto this. Okay? No changes anywhere, ever, except for the endings. Okay? So here are our active endings. The perfect endings are E, there it is, E.
So there's nothing in the first person thingy.
There's nothing you have to change.
Yeah.
Good, yeah, there's nothing you have to change. E, isti, it, imus, istis, erunt. So that is, all we have to do is we have to go to our third principal part. And just like we did by dropping the O, we'll do the same thing.
Another I to the end
No,
of that.
hold on. We'll do the same thing. We'll drop the long I and add those endings. So, let me do laudawi. Laudawi, laudawisti, laudawit, laudawimus, laudawistis, laudawerunt. Okay, so we drop the I just like we dropped the O. Okay, same thing. So those are our perfect endings. E isti it. Imus istis erunt. E isti it. Imus istis erunt. All right. Our pluperfect, right? More than perfect. Way back in the past. Pluperfect endings are actually the same as our imperfect forms of sum. Erum, eras, one R. Erat, eramus, erratus, errant. So the same thing. Laudaverum, laudaveras, laudaverat. I had praised. You had praised. He, she, it had praised. Laudaveramus, we had praised. Laudaveratis, y'all had praised. Laudaverant, they had praised. And then last but not least, our pluperfect endings. That
Wait,
we
you
would.
already did pluperfect.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Our future perfect endings. I probably would have repeated them and not even noticed. Thank you. Our future perfect endings. So these forms are actually the imperfect forms of sum. Erum, eras, erat. The future perfect are actually the future forms of sum with just one change. So the forms are ero, eris, erit, Eramus, eritus, errant with an I. And I'm going to just triple underline that because that's the one change from the future forms of sum. in sum in the future, it's actually erunt with a U, but you have to change that so that you're not confused with this U.
Huh.
Erunt. So that's just so that we avoid confusion. Okay? So same thing. Laudavero, I will have praise. Laudaveris. Curcurero, curcureris, curcurerit. Ooh, listen to all those R's. Curcuremus, curcurerotis. Anyway, so I will have run the race. Okay? So those are the verb tenses they're going to start to use pretty fluidly with you. But we want to do the same thing. And let's think about, and we're going to do some examples and look at some sample sentences. But let's think about what are the two things now that we have to train our eyes to look at. When we first started with verbs, we really had to look at those endings. And then we started to look for the tense sign, like ba, right? Bum or boss or butt, whatever it was. But now what do I have to start to look for? I have to start to train my eyes to look at what?
The middle.
Yeah, I actually have to start to look for my stem. Is this built off of laudo or lauda, or is it built off of laudawi, right? Lauda with a U at the end, or a V at the end. Same thing in Latin, okay? So now I have to not just look at my endings, for example, eratis. I can still see that's a tis ending, second person plural. But now I have to go, oh, wait a second. It's built off of laudal plus eratis. That's my pluperfect ending building off of the perfect stem. Okay? And this is what sets us up really for the last step in our verbs, is starting to realize sometimes I have a stem change, sometimes I had a tense sign like ba, and now these families of endings. So let's look at our exercises here in chapter 12, and just real quick, really quickly, I need an adverb there, look at our practice and review, and I'm going to write the verb forms up on the board. I'm just going to erase these perfect endings. E is the it, emos is this erunt. And here we go. So number one, what is the verb in practice and review number one?
Scriptistus.
Good. Scriptistus. Scriptistus. So we have to go, okay, what does this come from? And what is the ending?
Tis.
Gistus.
Okay, so now we can start to see, wait a second, it could be just a tis ending depending on what we've built off of. So I see that tis. Good. But now my question is, what is the stem? Is it... Okay, good. It's off of scripts. So what verb has a third principal part? And think about, this is where your English is really going to help you. This is where, being English speakers, you have an idea of what verb would give this idea.
Scribere.
Scribo, right? Think about it. You write in a script. So sometimes, actually, what you'll start to see is that in English, actually, our derivatives, for example, cursum, cursive, the course you run, almost none of our English derivatives actually come off of the first forms. Technically, our English derivatives come off of these third and fourth forms, almost always. Okay? So even though we could have laud or applaud or things like that, really they're usually coming off of these later forms. Okay? So scriptistus, good. We have a perfect active indicative, and then what person number with istis? E is the it, imus istis.
Plural second.
No.
Second person plural, good. So we have a perfect active indicative, second person plural from scribo. Okay, let's look at sentence 2. What are our verbs, or what is our verb?
Fuerunt.
Good, fuerunt. Now this one's tricky, so I'll give you a little bit of help. The principal parts of sum are sum, esse, fui.
Huh.
So here we can very clearly see what is it built off of.
Fui.
Good. It's built off of this perfect stem. So the cool thing is you can also realize then we only have 3 options for tenses. The perfect, the pluperfect, or the future perfect. So what do we have here? Perfect stem plus erunt.
Oh, it's the first one that you did.
Yeah, it's the perfect. Good, I've erased it. So erunt, there it is. They were. Okay. Look at number 3. What's our verb?
Fugarat.
Fugarat is our verb. Good. Now, Here's a great example of why I, as a mean old Latin teacher, make my students memorize macrons. So here we go. Fugio, fugere, fugi. Also a popular band, the Fugi. That's different. Okay. The Fugees, never mind.
Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry, I apologize for that. Okay, so here we can see it's built off of that long stem, fug, not the short stem, fug. So there you can really see one of the reasons why it matters. So now we can see, okay, perfect stem, fug, plus eros.
Do you want us to conjugate it?
Yeah, well, what is it?
Oh, it would be erat, pluperfect.
Third person singular from the pluperfect, right? So there it is. Okay? So he had fled, or she, or whoever it is in the sentence, okay? So that's now kind of this last step is to really start to hone your eyes and go, what stem is it building on? And oftentimes it'll be similar, but actually let me use this as an example. Ready? Perfect endings, e, isti, it. So that would make it fugit. Present endings, ost, fugio, fugere, fugit. The only difference is a macron. Fugit, he flees. Fugit, he was fleeing. Or he fled, pardon me. Okay. So there you really see illustrating the difference between a long vowel, fugit, and a short vowel, fugit. Okay? Questions on this? And again, there is a whole video up, I think it's called Verb Systems, and it's a 2-part video on my Latin channel also. So I probably did almost the identical thing that I did here, but you can watch it. Even if I don't get this video up like tomorrow, you can watch that and it'll help as you go through. Okay? Any other questions? Rose, you look like I hit you with a stick. It was a perfect system of sticks. Anything
I
from
had to
Kate,
get
Russ?
hit.
It hadn't even hit you yet, right? Anything? All right, awesome, guys. Well, it's good seeing you, and we'll figure out a date for the next one.
I think
soon.
we have the April one on the calendar, don't we?
Oh, the April one is up? It's the May one that was weird,
Yeah.
because that's a holiday weekend. Okay, that's right. So, okay, so we'll figure out the May one probably for next time. But
April
otherwise,
27th.
April 27th. Awesome.
Hold on, what the-
Awesome. See you guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, there's been a whole lot of Latin going on.